You're listening to Islam for Life with Shaykh Walead Mosaad. This podcast is brought to you by Seekers Hub Global. You can subscribe to this podcast and all of our other podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, or on our website, seekershub.fm. Visit seekershub.org for free online courses, our reliable answer service, and engaging media.
لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وتم التسليمات على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي نبي الرحمة والهدى وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So as Sidi Amr mentioned, we're trying to progress through the book entitled Manazil al-Sa'irin, or the Stations of the Wayfarers. Basically, this book is about cultivating the inner life, as it were, cultivating inner states, because that's what informs our outer states and our deeds and our acts. And so I believe that the prophetic teachings seek to imbibe within us these inner states so as to facilitate all of the fruits of those inner states, which then translate into how we go about worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ritual devotions, as-salah, and fasting, and so forth, and also how we deal with one another, the so-called horizontal relationships, how we deal with our families, with our neighbors, what's generally considered to be akhlaq, having good character and dealing with people equitably and justly and mercifully and with clemency and with forgiveness. And I think these are things that everybody wants to take part in, that they would like to have. But it's not always so easy to implement, because we find that sometimes we get in the way of ourselves. So we have hang-ups, we tend to become irritated at certain things, we become angry, we become emotional, and then we do things that we regret. And it's not just a question of mere willpower, as we said, just kind of will your way to it, but there's a certain methodology. We didn't talk about it too much during the course of the book, but central to all of this is that you have teachers and mentors who are there, a community, as it were, to help you come about and do this. You can't really do it by yourself. You can't really kind of pinpoint your own shortcomings, because we're always going to have a better opinion of how we are than we actually are. And usually we're going to have a worse opinion of other people than how they actually are. And it's actually safer to flip that around, to have a better opinion of people, even if maybe they may not be deserving so much of it, but you don't lose anything by doing that. And also to kind of take ourselves more to task, rather than always making so many excuses for ourselves, but let's lend those excuses for other people that we come into contact with. So the various maqamat then can be seen as the fruits of these spiritual struggles of al-mujahadat, struggling to wake up on time to pray Fajr, struggling to fast Ramadan, struggling to overcome your anger when you come in a certain situation and you don't want to act upon your anger, struggling to overcome your anxieties and your trepidations and your unsuredness about things, struggling to increase in your certainty about the divine, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when one is on that particular committed path, then certain fruits will come about it. And these will be translated into al-ahwal or al-maqamat, in these states that one can reach. And so we talked a little bit about grief in the sense of the grief that is divinely inspired, not grief, sadness over that which has been missed of the dunya, but sadness of missed opportunities that can lead one and help one with the akhirah. And then that would be the type of grief that would come about as a result of the spiritual state. Like he mentioned in the verse, Surah At-Tawbah, those who wanted to join the Prophet ﷺ on one of his campaigns, and back then there was no professional army. You had to equip your own army, you had to bring your own horse, your own sword, your own shield, and so forth. And if they didn't have that which they could equip themselves with, then they would have to be rejected by the Prophet ﷺ to join the campaign. تولوا وأعينهم تفيض من الدمع حزنا ألا يجدوا ما ينفقون. Right? They turn away and they're weeping or they're tearing in grief because they don't have what they need in order to join the campaign, which then is a campaign of falah, right? A campaign of success. And so our grief should be over missed opportunities like this. So, we briefly talked about grief. We talked about khawf, or fear. And fear here, in its higher sense, is not fear of punishment, but fear in the recognition of the maqam, of the status of your Lord. وَمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى يَخَافُونَ رَبَّهُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ. Right? So they fear their Lord from above them. This aboveness is not an aboveness of a physicality, but it's an aboveness of a spiritual nature, right? Of a jalali nature, of a nature that cannot be fully expressed in words, but can be felt by the heart, right? Understanding that you should have hayba and you should have fear and awe and be in reverence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is one of the outcomes then of the spiritual mujahadat, of this spiritual struggle, and not a blind, naked fear of just fear of pain or fear of missed opportunity, but fear in the understanding that this is Allah, not anybody we're talking about. And then we moved on and we talked about al-ishfaq, which is sort of a combination. Can't think of one single English word to kind of express it, but it's a combination, I think, of concern and compassion at the same time. So you're concerned about something, and you're a little bit maybe apprehensive, but at the same time, you have compassion for that thing that it turns out okay. So ishfaq then, as he says here, there's hadar maqrunan bitarahum, right? So there's kind of a vigilance, being careful, and at the same time, one has this feeling of compassion about it. So sometimes he's saying here that we should feel this ishfaq upon our souls or upon our egos, right? Realize that it's trying to take you to places and it's just merely trying to serve its appetite, nothing more than that, and that's part of who you are. So we mentioned that sometimes you find in some of the books, they talk about how I had this conversation with my nafs, with my ego, and I asked it, this and that, and I told it this, and it responded to me in this way, and I tried to defeat it, but then it kept coming back, and so forth. So you're going to have kind of this sort of inner conversation with yourself, but once you realize you are having that conversation, right? Once you realize that the nafs is just merely a facet or an aspect of who you are, and it's not who you are. It doesn't represent your entirety. And then you can see that, then that's the first step towards overcoming it, towards getting a better handle on it. And we talked also about khushu'a, which is reverence, which generally will be in countering or in reaction, or part of an infi'al, a reaction to something that will elevate it, that will inspire it. أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Right? Is it not time for those who believe that this takhsha', this khushu'a, that their hearts should be ready for it? Why? لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. For the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then that what Allah has revealed from haqq, that which has come down from haqq. So there's two books to be read, as we've said many times. Kitab Allah al-Mastur wa Kitab Allah al-Manzur. Right? The books that you read between in the lines, which is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. And we do a lot of that in Ramadan, alhamdulillah. But we should also keep in mind that that's a key, that's a guide to reading the book of creation. Kitab Allah al-Manzur min al-Nazar. أَلَمْ يَنظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ أَفَلَا يَنظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Right? وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر. Do they not see how the camel has been created? Do they not see how the sky has been above them? Do they not see how the mountains have been raised? Do they not see how the earth has been flattened? فذكر. So remind them. This is speaking to the Prophet ﷺ. إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر. Remind them, you are the one who brings remembrance to them, rejoinders to them. You're not the one who's going to force them. You're just reminding them. So the Quran points us to consider, to have nadar. Right? And nadar means you can read the book of creation. It's not enough just to read the book of Allah. The book of Allah takes you in the direction of, well, now you have to read the book of creation and read the signs within it, because that too will increase you in certainty. وَكَذَلِكَ نُورِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. Right? And this is how we show Ibrahim مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Right? The divine inspiration in the heavens and in the earth. وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. And that he may be from amongst those who have iqan, certainty, from amongst those who have certitude, absolute certitude about the nature of all of this and what's really behind it. It's not a random sequence of events, or we didn't win the multiverse sweepstakes, and that there's an infinite number of other universes, and just how we got the right one, and all the other ones failed. It's not like that. There's itqan, there's sun'ah, right? There's rahmah. We're exactly the way we're supposed to be, in exactly the manner that Allah fashioned it and made it to be. And so you need to learn to read the book of the creation. And then this will teach you to have khushu' for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, that's kind of just the gist of some of the ones that we went over. Hopefully, sometime in the future, we'll have an opportunity to kind of read more of it and learn from these very wise words of our ulama who traverse these paths. And with the remaining time, the 15 minutes or so, we can take some questions about this or something related, if people are so inclined, whether they're here or online.
So we were talking about the difference between states and stations. So my question is twofold. A, how does one recognize the difference between states and stations? And the second thing is, should one aspire for stations, or is this something that just one should keep blind eye toward them?
Tamam. So what's the difference between a hal and a maqam, or a state and a station? As we said, the hal is temporary. It could be kind of in reaction to something, and it could be in the moment type of feeling. Whereas the maqam is something that has more of a permanence. And you generally, when you're in a certain maqam and realization, when you move on to something else, you're bringing that which was previous with you. So it's not like you went from, what do we start with? Al-huzn ila al-khawf, and then you lose all of the kind of divinely inspired grief, and now you're just in, not necessarily, you bring it with you, and so you're kind of cumulatively adding as you go along. How do you know which one that you're in? Usually it's good to kind of have a shaykh or a teacher who can help people with that, but the general rules, I think, is that there'll be more of you'll feel more of a permanence when you're in the maqam. The hal, you'll feel it and then it goes away. But the maqam, you'll feel more of a thabat, like a permanence in it, and that you're not easily shaken now, and that you kind of have that in who you are. Sometimes you can't always tell that though. Sometimes you can, you're oblivious even to where you are with yourself. There are awliya of Allah who don't know that they're awliya. There are awliya who don't know they're awliya. There are awliya who do know they're awliya. There are different types. So sometimes they can't always even recognize that within themselves. So it's important, that's why, to have this mentorship, to have access to that, to help one along with it. I think that's kind of what I could say about it. Anyone else? Yes, Fadda.
Question about zuhur. So, how can we make this distinction so that people are not attached to the earthly matter, but still we still need to pursue science, pursue learning, pursue life matters, and not disregard everything. I don't think that what's important, the hereafter being important, our goal is to leave everything in life. So, but how can we make that distinction? And how can we work to make sure that we leave this when someone leaves, trying to make this earth a better place?
Tamam. I think one of the common misconceptions about some of these maqamat, especially zuhud or renunciation of the dunya, that it means a physical separation from everything around you. It doesn't mean that at all. The Prophet ﷺ very clearly discouraged people from doing that, and the Quran very clearly discouraged people from doing that. He said clearly, "La rahbaniyya fil Islam." There's no monasticism where you kind of live out in the mountain by yourself and leave everything and just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran describes the previous رَهْبَانِيَةٍ ابْتَدَعُوهَا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ. They made up this rahbaniyah, this monasticism and living in kind of far away in order to be more pious people. So our monasticism is internal, it's not external. It's not physical separation or an isolation from society and leaving everything off. No, it's quite the opposite. It's an internal one. So you could be amongst the people, right? You could be amongst the multitudes, but there is a solitude in the heart even when you're amongst the multitude, which means that you recognize that there should be this sort of spiritual detachment from having inclinations toward putting our aspirations in the dunya. Because that's what the lethal part is, that's what the dangerous part is. But if you look to our great, our predecessors, they built civilizations. In fact, these are the meanings by which a true functioning and sustainable civilization is built upon. A civilization is not going to be built upon materialism. It's not going to be built upon utilitarianism. It's not going to be built upon liberal values. It should be built upon these values that we're talking about. That sees at both times the temporal nature and the temporary nature of this world, the fleeting nature of it, but in order that it's built upon values that are timeless, that are sustainable, that will continue. That's why no one can deny that Muslims built the best civilizations that there ever were. And the best functioning ones, and the ones that address the human condition in the best way, in all of its different aspects. So spiritually, emotionally, mentally, in terms of meeting people's needs, the social functions, social welfare, all of those things, the waqf system, there's so many things that we can talk about. So there's no contradiction between those things. The modern world wants to make us think there is. The modern civilization is built upon the idea that any inherited wisdom that came from before, anything that we talk about in terms of timeless value, is necessarily going to be problematic in building a modern civilization. Because the modern is built upon rediscovering the wheel as you go along and really disparaging anything that came from before. The modern education system is built upon this, right? We study history so that just we know that, that's nice, but not to inform our present, not that necessarily lessons can be drawn from it. And the modern philosophies also were predicated on this. And they removed Allah, they removed God from the center of everything, and they put man at the center of everything. So now we have, rather than a theocentric understanding of the way the world is, we have a homocentric understanding, where man is the center of the universe, where man is celebrated, and God has no role in it whatsoever. And we see the fruits of that type of thinking. We see people become dehumanized, because when you remove the divine from the human experience ceases to be human. It becomes machine-like. It becomes just very, mechanistic, like a machine. And that's what society is turning us into. It's turning into little machines. We carry these little stupid devices around, right? And we're all sitting there, like, looking at it, and we're just kind of like these robots, and we're losing the ability even to socialize and talk with one another and hear one another out and listen and so forth. So, to me, the beginning of the rebuilding of true civilization begins with these understandings, right? But putting them in the proper context, in the proper place. Yes?
How can this wisdom be made public in a simple way? Because you see Hal al-Ummah, some people tell you just why do this, why study, why do so and so. There's nothing in this world. It's the hereafter only. So like this wisdom needs to be simplified to the masses. I'm not sure I'm being you know how الأمة كيف this situation.
You know what? I mean, I agree to an extent, but let's be a little bit positive about Hal al-Ummah too, because look at what the Ummah went through in the past 200 or 300 years. Yani basically, nearly every Muslim country in the world was colonized in the past 200 or 300 years by European powers. Their institutions of learning were either weakened to a degree they're no longer recognized, or they're completely dismantled. They, in some cases, were closed down completely for decades. Napoleon, who led kind of the wave of European colonization in 1798, one of the things that he did is he marched his horses into Al-Azhar, which at then was Al-Azhar as it is today, and it had its reputation. And he had his horses go in there and use it as a stall and defecate in there, and then he would kill one Azhari ulama every day, hang one of them every day. And when we're talking about a society that maybe had, 100 or 200,000 inhabitants, and then you kill one every day, and there's only 2,000 or 3,000 of them, then you can see the effect that it would have on the ummah. وهكذا. And this is what they did. They ran rampant over this, over our countries and over our societies. But yet, despite all of that, and all that it went through, we're still sitting here. We still know what the deen is. Our Quran is intact. Our Sunnah is intact. Our texts are intact. We still have ulama. We still know what Lugha Arabiya means. We know how it's important. We still have our ethics. We still have the practice of Islam. We still probably have the vast majority of the world's Muslims still fast Ramadan every year. So really, despite all of what you would have think would have been a complete kind of annihilation of our ummah and of the deen, it still continues to survive despite all the things that are going on. So I think we've seen a lot of darkness, especially in the past decade or so, and especially in our countries, and a lot of internecine fighting, and a lot. But I'm hopeful and optimistic that we definitely know for sure it's not going to last forever. So the question remains: are we going to be part of the group and the ones that Allah chooses, by which the nahda, by which kind of this revival is going to happen, or are we just going to be kind of the ones who criticize and get in the way, or they want to be a part of it? So I think everyone has a part to do, and our part, nothing is trivial. If you can live in Canada and you can raise your children well, so that they know the deen well enough that when they have their own kids, they're also teaching the deen to them, this is a huge victory. It's not a small thing, because you know people and you see people around you. How many people are able to do that? It's not easy. It's very difficult, right? Despite the challenges around us, and it can be made easier. It can be facilitated because you can't do it by yourself. The modern paradigm tells you, the parents have to be Superman and Superwoman, Supergirl, whatever, Superwoman. And they have to do everything by themselves. And they shouldn't need help from anybody, and they should feel completely comfortable moving away from any sort of extended family that they have, so they don't need to live next to their brothers and sisters and uncles and grandparents, and they can live on the other side of the country, and both have full-time jobs, and do it, and everything will be great. No, everything's not going to be great. You need a community. You need extended family, right? Our young sisters know when they have babies that they need a break sometimes, and they need to, be able to have, a mother or mother-in-law or a sister-in-law or someone from the community, and, division of labor and sharing of these tasks and things like that. And without that support system, right, without these bonds of fellowship and kinship that form communities, life is going to be exceedingly difficult. What's it going to be? You and your wife and your children and Netflix? And that's your life? That's what they're telling us. That's what they think, that's all we need. Right? As long as I have 200 satellite channels or cable channels on my cable subscription, then I have everything that's in-house, and I can watch as many YouTube videos as I want to learn about child rearing and changing my flat tire and what else, and I don't need anybody else. It's like, you guys seen the Matrix movie, right? The old Matrix movies? You know, where like people are actually living this type of mechanistic life. They're actually living in pods, right? And they're just being usurped, sucked for their blood to feed these machines. That's what we're living, right? Everyone is living in their nice little suburban house or their apartment, and most of the time we're within the confines of the four walls, and we have ourselves and our entertainment systems, and you know that keeps us kind of just moving along without really thinking about what else we can do, what we can do of service and love and other things and meanings for society, and we're kind of numb to it all. And then we're surprised when our young people are not interested in the deen, and we're surprised when these big celebrities commit suicide. Why are we surprised? Why would we be surprised? Look at it. You know, they keep saying it's a mental health issue. It's not a mental health issue. I'm sorry. I think it's a social health issue. With the prevalence of all of these maladies amongst people, you have to begin to question, maybe there's something wrong with the way that we're living. And it's not, when young people as young as 12 take military-grade weaponry and go into public schools and shoot and kill people, it's not just a mental health issue. There's something wrong with the society. When you celebrate violence and you celebrate sexual promiscuity in your culture, right, and in your movies and in your films and in your video games, and then you question, well, why do people then somehow get affected by that and act upon it? Why are you surprised? Why are we surprised about all of that? Obviously, all of these things will have an effect. When pornography makes up roughly 60 to 75% of internet traffic, and then you wonder why we have all of these sexual dysfunction and harassment and abuse, which is rife and rampant, why are we surprised when this is what people are living? So, we as Muslims, I think we're the last stop. There's nobody else left to resist this. Everybody else has capitulated. Everybody else has given in. Everybody else has, left the fight. But we're the last ones. There's nobody else. And there are those amongst us who are ready to give up the fight too and just, join the winners. But I'm not ready to do that. We have to be able to say that we're going off a cliff. And it's we, not them, we, because we're with them. If they go off the cliff, we go off the cliff too. So, like the parable of the ship that the Prophet ﷺ described, you have two levels, and there's a group at the bottom who are boring in the hull of the ship, and the people up top are oblivious. The whole ship is going to sink. It doesn't matter if you're not the one boring in the hole at the bottom. So, I think efforts like Seekers Hub, the Muslim chaplaincy of Toronto, and I'm sure Sidi Amjad is going to talk about that, but that's a whole other thing. When you send your kids to university, right, you're exposing them to perhaps something that's unprecedented for them. They are getting this influx of ideas. We think we send them to university and they're going to learn some engineering, some economics, and, learn some skills, get a good job, and have the two-car garage, and that's how it doesn't work like that. Because they're going to be exposed to a whole new set of ideas that are often contradictory. Our universities are no longer universal. There's not a universal binding sort of overarching philosophy that informs it. In each different class that they take, they're going to get the feeling that whichever class they're taking, this is how the world is. So when you take an engineering class, you're going to get the feeling that, well, the world is just, everything about it can be engineered. If you take a sociology class, then everything about it can be seen via the prism of sociology or psychology or biology or bioethics or whatever. So whatever class that you're in, then you see it via those lenses, because that's what it teaches you. It doesn't show you, don't these all complement one another and form a sort of a whole? No, they don't. They don't do that. Not anymore. That's not how it works in the modern university system. So when our children get exposed to this, right, and then they think about, where does my deen fit in all of this? Right? When I'm studying biology and physiology, and they're insisting that Darwin's theory of the species and evolution is not just a theory, but it's actually something. If you don't think that way, you don't see the world this way, something's wrong with you. What do we do for them then? And we don't have intelligent responses most of the time from our side, because we don't even understand the metaphysics of it all. We don't even understand like the underpinning philosophies that inform how to look at the world. All you can say is, oh no, evolution, no, haram, it's bad. We don't have an answer. We don't have an intelligent response about why is it wrong, or why is it not right, and what can we agree with, and what shouldn't we agree with, and are there things that have some leeway for discussion, or they don't? Where are they going to learn all of that? But yet, it's like throwing them in the lion's den, right, with the hungry lion, and then expect them somehow to survive. So, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and there's not enough people doing it. And so, roll up your sleeves, and if you can help with something, then, join in. Yes?
Sometimes certain actions within the set of actions are pleasing to Allah, more pleasing to the one performing them. For example, acts of worship or seeking knowledge or prayer, have a direct and immediate effect on the one performing them than other actions which could also have the community involvement or maintaining ties with one's family and speaking to the people in the community and so on. So is it blameworthy to restrict oneself? Maybe restrict is a strong word, but to incline and almost solely perform those actions that are also pleasing to oneself, or should one deliberately do those other actions that one's, I guess, the nafs rebels against?
Yeah, and the doors to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are many, right? And some people can go through several doors and some may go through a few, but if you find one of those doors or more being facilitated for you, right, they're easier for you to do and you find yourself in them, then that's a good indication that may be your door. So it's not, I don't see it as a hadh nafsi thing, as something like it's just what's pleasing to me, but if you find Allah's facilitating that for you, then perhaps that's the way you should go. Some people will be serving in this way, some people serving in that way, some people will be serving in a number of ways, right? And Allah is calling you maybe from multiple doors or maybe just a few, but heed His call. So I think that's one of the the best ways to go about doing it. Obviously also we should try to be balanced in our kind of, especially when we talk about ritual worship. So we should all have some sort of regular kind of extra ritual worship that we do, whether it involves sadaqat and salawat and so forth, and be balanced in that. But you might find that fasting is really easy for me, and I find that I have this, like Sayyidina Amr ibn Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As went to the Prophet ﷺ and he told him, like we said the other day, I can still do better than this. I can do better than Mondays and Thursdays and 3 days a week. And then he told him every other day, and then he even said, I can do better than that. Well, the Prophet ﷺ told him, you can't do better than that. There's no better than this. So then do the fast of Dawood every other day. But fasting was his thing. So be it. The Prophet ﷺ didn't discourage him. He encouraged him, right? And he gave him more, as he said, I wanted more. And he didn't necessarily steer him to something else. But he also tried to keep him in balance, right? Because in another good way, he said, I'm going to fast every day and never break my fast. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no. He said, I don't fast every day. وَأَنَا أَتْقَاكُمْ وَأَخْشَاكُمْ لِلَّهِ. I don't fast every day and I have more taqwa and more khashya than any of you. Because I'm the Prophet ﷺ. So, sum waftir. Fast sometimes and break your fast sometimes. Be balanced in it. So maintain the balance in it, and at the same time recognize it's a blessing from Allah that Allah has facilitated this for you. InshaAllah. I guess we're out of time.
Thank you for listening to Islam for Life with Shaykh Walead Mosaad. If you liked this podcast, we'd appreciate if you left us a review on iTunes and Google Play. Help Seekers Hub spread the light of guidance to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.